Hello, so today I thought we could talk about conditional logic. So conditional logic is basically if statements, else statements and that sort of thing. So we'll go from the basics and go a bit more complex in a single video, and we'll try to cover as much as we can without getting too complicated to it. Alright, so let's jump into Paint. So the basic conditional logic you'll find is if statements. So something along the lines of if, and then your condition, and then the logic that you write here would be executed. That's the general case of, that's the most basic version of conditional logic. Now, you might ask, well, what is the condition here? Well, it could be anything. It could be something like saying, is x greater than y, or whatever these variables might mean. With conditions, they are a bit odd. So there's something called Boolean expressions, and that's almost a mathematical itself, understanding whether a Boolean expression means something or means something else. So the most general cases you'll find for Boolean cases or Boolean expressions is something greater than, so is x greater than y, or is x greater than or equal to y, or is something smaller than y, or is something smaller than or equal to y. So in this case, x is going down here, and so is y. Yeah, you've got these cases. You've got, is it equal to, or if you're testing out something, there's another version where it's equal to. There's a whole variety of different expressions. We'll explore them later, but I don't think we need to cover everything in this video. We'll go, as we naturally program, we'll learn new conditions and new operators to use. So we'll go over that later. So that's that. Let's try actually implementing that in some of our code. So what we're going to do is basically have a variable called x. Let's initialize that as 0. Actually, let's initialize that as positive 3. And then we want to render a circle to the screen. And we'll say it's at coordinate, let's say 100, in between the brackets, and we'll say 100. Actually, we'll give our x position, x value here, and we will say here x is incremented by 3. Now, I do believe before I talked about incrementing values, like incrementing x by 3. So in this case, the circle should move across the screen from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. So like that. Now you can have different incrementations. You can have x, if you want to go up by 1, you can have obviously x equals x plus 3. There's plenty of different short ways to do it, and we'll probably cover that in the video or some other videos, but we're going to keep things shorthand. So we'll say here x plus equal 3. That basically means x equals x plus 3, so get whatever its original value is and then plus 3 to it. And so what should happen is it will increment slowly to the right hand side. So what we can say here is if x is larger than, there is also a variable in p5JS called width. So before I talked about canvas width, which covers the whole thing here, width is just grabbing this parameter here, and height is grabbing that parameter there. It's just an easy way of doing it without hard coding things. So it means that if we change this, for example, to 500, it'll dynamically change with it. So we'll say if x is bigger than width, then we'll say x equals 0. So what that should do is it will jump straight back to the beginning, and you'll have it in a continuous loop. Cool, right? So conditional logic here is saying if x is greater than width or equal to. Now, generally speaking, with this sort of condition, you wouldn't say if it's equal to width, because what can happen is, as your number is incrementing by 3, let's say the width is 5. Let's say the width here is 400, and you're at the value. Yeah, so let's say your x value right now is equal to 399, right? And your width your width is equal to 400, what will end up happening is as you plus 3 to that, that will equal 402. Right? And that will surpass our 400 mark. So generally with this sort of stuff where you're checking a condition matches a certain position value or if it exceeds a certain distance, you would probably use your inequality sign. So if it's larger than width, then you'll do that to cover it. So you'll say larger than and equals to. So the general rule of thumb here is the inequality goes first and then the equal sign goes after. Because you say if it's greater than or equal to, the inequality comes first. Alright, so that's a simple case of just using an x, of using a condition there. But you also have this case called else. So else would be something like this. Else, and what that basically means is, if this condition does not apply, then do this statement. So let's say, for example, if our x value is not greater than the width of the screen, how about we increase the speed? So we can say x plus equals 10. So now what's happening is it draws the background, creates a circle on screen, checks if the x value that we're using to move our circle is bigger than or equal to our width. If that's the case, make it equal to 0, which is doing here, is jumping to 0. Otherwise, do x plus equals 10. So x equals x plus 10. But also we then jump onto this line. So we're saying x plus equals 10, but then also x plus equals 3. So if we comment this out, we should see a slight slowdown in the circle. Yeah, you can see it slowed down slightly. Right? So that's what else does. As these two are chained together, what essentially happens is one of these conditions has to be true for this to kind of jump out of a block. So think of this as being contained in a single block. This is a block of things. So what ends up happening is it goes through this, goes through that, and then whatever case becomes true, it just jumps out of this entire block. It doesn't look like the bottom condition. So that comes into play when we do if else. So if else is a different story. So let's move into Paint, be more clear there. Let's Control A this and delete it. So we've covered if and else. There's something else called if else. So imagine you have if, and that's your condition, and then you've got some logic applied there. What you can also have is else if, so E-L-S-E. Alright, so we're here. We can then say something on the lines of if else, let's say our y value, we'll say if x is larger than equals width half. So so what we're saying here is, actually let me finish this off. Actually we'll leave it like that. So what this is saying here is, if x is larger than the width of the screen, then make x equals 0, so it goes back to the beginning. Otherwise, or else if this condition is true, if x is larger than half the width of the screen, so if the width is, so let's make that bigger, let's say 500 now. So as it reaches halfway of the screen, the circle speeds up because this condition becomes true. And so what that means is, it comes to this statement, does that, and then jumps onto the third line, or the next line, because you can see it speeds up with the 10 plus speed and the 3 plus speed. Otherwise, if none of these conditions are true, it leaves the block executing no code and then moves on to the next line here. So yeah, let's say this again. So let's say else if x is larger than or equal to the width of the screen, then let's change the color of the circle. So we'll have we'll keep it grayscale. So and we'll set that equal to 0. Actually, we'll set it to 255, so it's white, and then we'll say here fill, and then we'll have here color, and we're using color with a U because I'm British, and then we'll say here color is equal to 120. Now just have a look on screen what actually is happening. So even though we wrote this else if condition, which says if x is bigger than or equal to the width, which is the same one at the top, it doesn't actually change color. Because what's happening is it goes through the condition, and the first one happens to be true, which is x equals 0, then it exits out of this whole block here completely. So you see, no color change. Whereas if we said something like here, if we had, let's make it easy to understand, let's say we got this here and put this outside of that. Let's see if you can. You can see, so you see that the colors change now. It's changed completely to 120, as opposed to not changing at all. So you see how if statements here, you use different types. So you can either use if, or if else, or if else, and depending on the situation you want, use one of the two blocks. Now, I think that covers conditional statements for now. Obviously we'll explore them with further videos, and then you'll have a better grasp on them, but this is just to get you started. Have a play around with this. Again, I'll link the code in the video description. Just have a play around with it and see what you can find out. Yeah, that covers everything for today. See you next time. Bye bye.